Teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to have you back for more. To my regular listeners, you already know how we get down here. We bring you nothing but the best. When you hit the play button on this show, we are here to explain to you whatever challenges, whatever things that you may be going through in your business, in your personal life, whatever it is. You are not going through it alone. We are here to serve you, and that is why the show is the number one show on innovative teamwork. Why there's a new episode that comes out every single day. Today we have Miss Beate Chelette, the business growth architect, and I got to tell you, whatever excuses you may have had before this show, or whatever things you may have thought you were going through, all of that is about to be eradicated at this moment. You know, it's not. Understand again, like I said. You never know what someone's going through, and you never know how things can actually play out, no matter how bad things may seem. She's a lady who was at, I believe you said $135,000 in debt at one time. And just like that, a letter to the president, all of a sudden you're selling your company to Bill Gates. So there's a lot of things, a lot of ground we have to cover here. So before I make the intro too long, Beate, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. And then let's make this relevant for your audience. And, what does this have anything to do with team building?
Absolutely, man. And the thing about team building, and what I say all the time is, even though we're calling it team building, it's also about the individual mindset. You know, it's also about you as an individual making yourself the best you can be for a team, and making it so you're doing the inner work and the work that you have to do so you can show up for your team. And some of the things that you were mentioning, like I was telling you before we started recording, I was listening to you before, is that, you kind of caught, I'd say, some bad luck, all right, to put it mildly, when you first, was it Germany that you first moved out here from?
Yes.
So kind of walk us through a little bit about your background and your transition from Germany to the States, and how you were able to, handle a lot of the things that you went through.
Yeah, happy to. So my story really is probably like many, many stories, is you just don't feel like you entirely fit in, and had the adequate amount of being laughed at and being, not the so smart kid. And
Mhm.
but I've always been really interested in the creative side of things. And when I failed in school, and in Germany, you have three different school systems, and there's a really good one, and there's a middle one, and there's a not so good one. And I was in the middle one, and I grew up, really having to listen to on that I was the least smart in our family, and that my siblings were so much smarter than me. And I realized very early on that this method of how we teach or train people that then go into businesses, that's really incredibly boring, because you take existing information, you're not allowed to question it, and then you have to remember the information exactly like they give it to you. And
Yeah.
then when you regurgitate it, then they give you an A. And that somehow that somehow is supposed to be innovative and move the needle forward.
Right.
So even as a
It's kind of
teenage,
the employee mindset. You just regurgitating information,
exactly.
and you're not really being told or taught how to apply information and learn about it in a way that's going to be creative and make it so you push society forward. It's almost like they just want you to regurgitate it, give you your A, okay, all of a sudden you're a success. And that's like, I agree with you 1000%. That's why school for me was incredibly tough, is because I'm an incredibly creative and critical thinker that's always challenging authority, and that is a challenge.
Right. But what nobody tells you is that if you have that, then you probably have leadership qualities that, instead of being angry and frustrated, probably need to be channeled into leadership development.
Yeah,
Because if you feel that you don't want to follow the mold, that rules are there to be either bent or broken, then that really is a leadership quality in disguise. But nobody told me that back then. And so there was this moment, and I always tell this story, and I think it's relevant because we have a lot of people that are looking in to team culture and building
yeah,
teams, or perhaps stepping into leadership themselves. And so I took this aptitude test, and it's like 16 pages long. I mean, everything in Germany is very thorough, right?
right.
And it says, like, are you afraid of heights? Do you like being outside? Are you schlepping stuff? Are you okay with that? Are you physically fit? I'm like, sure, yes, 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 yes. And it says I should be a roofer. Now, let's just say it's nothing wrong with being a roofer, but it wasn't exactly the career choice that I had. And
Right.
then I talked to the counselor and say, well, that's really not what I want to be. And she's like, Well, what do you want to be? Jewelry designer? No, too many applicants, no jobs.
Now, this was
Uh,
in high school. You were still doing this, like
yeah, yeah,
senior.
exactly. And
Mhm.
and so they're giving me all these things to choose from. And every time I mention something that I want to do, she says, no, there's too many applicants, not enough jobs. And
Mhm.
then I finally looked at her and I was like, okay, so fine. What do you suggest? Because you shoot everything that all of my ideas down. She says, John, you want to be a secretary?
A secretary.
Secretary.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, no, I don't.
Right.
And so I became a photographer anyway, because that was one of the goals that I have. And then I realized very early that I was better at the business side of things. That it really came easy to me to when somebody says, well, how do we do that? How do we, how do we build this? Or how do we get a team of photographer and models to an island on a boat after they flew for 12 hours for a photo shoot? And how are we going to get the makeup artist from Paris, via London over to South Africa to the shoot?
Mhm.
And that was easy for me. The
Hmm.
building these systems was always easy for me. And so I realized that I was better at the business side behind the thing. So I ended up being photo editor at Elle magazine, which
Mm.
in everybody's book is a really freaking phenomenal job, except once you're a photo editor at 23, there really is no place to go. That's it. You're done. You're a photo editor, and what am I going to be, a senior photo editor, a super senior photo editor?
Right.
I mean, there is now,
There's
you
no
are a
growth.
photo,
There's no growth.
there's literally no growth there.
Mhm.
And so I said, I'm going to immigrate to the United States. And I came here
Mm.
and started representing photographers and do production. I was able to do some really good work with some great climate. Great production client was Wrangler, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and next thing I know, I'm working for companies like Mercedes-Benz, BMW,
Mhm.
um, Wrangler, Levi's. I was kind of like the cool kid here, and
Right.
everybody who from Europe that produced came here, and we did a lot of activewear photo shoots with the photographers I represented, including Cameron Diaz when she was a model.
Right.
And I remember very well when Cameron Diaz was in my office, and in the bikinis that we were
It's
photographing.
something about Mary.
Well, I remember having the conversation with
Yeah.
her when she came after the movie just finished filming The
Yeah.
Mask. And we were, like when you're doing a casting,
Right.
you do small talk, and it's like, how's it going, Cameron? And she's like a rock and roll girl, right? So
Yeah.
she very cool, no pretense. And she's like, I just finished this movie with this guy, Jim Carrey. He's like some comedian,
Yeah.
and I have no idea. It's kind of a little weird.
Right.
But yeah, it's gonna come out, I think, in 6 months or so. So
Right.
I'll be curious to see where that goes. And
And that was
then
like a box office hit. That was like a blockbuster. That's a big movie.
it was a huge movie. We never
Yeah.
saw her as a model again, because then she,
Right.
immediately went into her amazing career as an artist. I mean, these are, we have lots of stories like this
Yeah,
because
but yeah,
I've been.
that's why I kind of want to kind of keep you there for a second. Like, walk us through the day by day a little bit, because that that element, I don't want it to get brushed over, in which somebody tells you, somebody that you're supposed to actually be looking up to, tells you, oh, you're just going to be a secretary, and then a couple of years later, you make the decision to be a photographer, learn the business, and now you're meeting all these, your Mercedes, Wrangler, BMW, Cameron Diaz. You're having all of these like high level conversation. You must be at this point so detached from what authority actually looks like. And now it's like, wait a minute, I was told I could just be a secretary, but now I'm out here doing my thing. I'm making sure certain things are being represented. Kind of walk us through where you were mentally as you're, transitioning and debunking this myth that this person just told you you could only be a secretary.
Well, actually, I commend you that you picked up on that, because
Mhm.
there was a moment where this kind of like all came together. And that moment was when I was just before I left Germany. I was an assistant for a photographer, and my job was to figure out how to get an Audi Quattro via a helicopter on top of a glacier for a photo shoot. That was like the big prize giveaway for this catalog.
Oh
And so
man.
there, yeah, I was just crazy stuff.
Right.
And so I want you to imagine me on a Swiss glacier. And this is like Mission Impossible. And
Yeah.
you hear the helicopter before you see it. It goes like,
Right.
And then
Yeah.
the helicopter comes up over the mountain with this long string. And on this long string is this net. And in this net is the Audi Quattro. And then that gets dropped off, right there where we want to shoot the
Yeah.
car. And I'm standing there and I remember this moment to this day. And I'm thinking, I am outside. I am definitely schlepping and I'm not afraid of heights.
Right.
I'm doing exactly
Right.
what the aptitude test said. It
Right.
was just the interpretation was wrong.
Right. Oh my goodness. That's amazing. That's an amazing. I mean, we're so used to watching or maybe looking at magazines or watching the commercial where we see these cars in certain places. You just taught me something. So there was actually you get the helicopter and make sure everything and you have to get over those things that you said you could not do.
Exactly, and you're like there with a walkie-talkie. I'm like, okay, now take this 10 meter over to the left. Oh, now
Right.
careful, careful, careful,
Right,
careful.
right,
Yeah,
right.
everything's clear. Copy that.
Wow. That's amazing. That is crazy.
Yes.
All right.
So that was really the moment where
Yeah.
this part about understanding that when you have the friction in what other people assume you are or should be,
Hmm.
that is really the obstacle that shows you where the path is.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's this book, The Obstacle is the Way, or saying the mess is the message.
Hmm.
And I think that people oftentimes, when they get into the mess or they hit the obstacle, that they go, oh, shoot, I can't go any further.
Yeah.
But really, this is where it starts. The solution of where you want to go sits in that moment. It is in that, it's like a dark room where there's a light switch.
Fantastic.
This you just close the blackout windows and you don't remember. And now
Mhm.
you're crawling around and you're like, I know the damn thing is here. I just have to, flip the switch. And
Mhm.
so when you have this mindset, this is what this moment taught me,
Mhm.
that it is not necessarily that other people's interpretation of what I should be,
Mhm.
or what my capabilities are wrong. It is what they think I can achieve is wrong.
Yeah. Right.
And let me say,
Mhm.
putting a helicopter with a car on a
Yeah.
glacier is a
Yeah.
hell of a lot more fun than being in an office typing.
Absolutely. And I again I commend you for stepping up to the challenge, but there was a situation that I was listening to you talk about earlier where I believe was it an employee that you had took your idea and started running with it, and then it ended up getting to a point where you ended up, I guess, losing what you had or something like that. I'll let you kind of fill us in, but you're
Yeah.
you're going through this and you're getting the confidence to do certain things, and obviously people working underneath you, you have to bring people on, and then everything is the most challenging
Everything goes
part.
to
Everything goes
hell in a
crazy. So,
handbasket in a
so yeah,
nanosecond. Yeah.
right. I'll let
Yeah.
you.
So now here I am on the top of the world. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm producing. I'm running $1 million business. I'm in the 4% of all business owners, and I got people working for me, and everything is great. And then one day I just had this really weird feeling in my stomach, which I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to. And I
Right.
go, something's not right. My employee that was, with me in the office is acting very strange. And I
Hmm.
fired her. And then it turns out I fired her 2 weeks too late. So she had come up with this idea on how to run her own business, which was my business without me, with
Right.
my key vendor. Next thing I know, invoices I paid are the invoices I billed were paid to them, and they had come up with all these lies that I wasn't paying them, withholding money. It's like, yeah, you were, I didn't even know you had left the company. I didn't even you didn't even quit. The vendor, the photographer, didn't even tell me that he left.
Hmm.
But next thing I know is that they say, oh, no, 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 that's because that they have this new company where she was representing this photographer. I said, oh, I didn't know that. So I sued them because I did not know any better. I thought that, suing people and the American justice system is about, you know, getting wrongs
Hmm.
be undone, or that you get a right. And that certainly is not the case. But I fought.
No, I don't mean to. I got to pause you there because,
uh,
like I was telling you, there's a lot of business owners that listen to the show, and the majority of them are very much about how to bring in the right people.
yes.
As you look back on it, what are the things that you think you could have sort of avoided, or that you would have done differently to avoid that situation? Because it seems like the structure was not in place for you to detect when someone is doing something completely foul.
Yes, I made the biggest mistake any business owner can make, and it's called mini me cloning.
Mm,
It's when you think that if you only had somebody who was just like you,
wow.
that you could go and do your thing, and then that person would kind of like in the same integrity and
Right.
way would do it, and that just does not exist.
Mm,
That if you want to teach somebody how to do your business and
right.
screw you, by all means go ahead and do that.
Right.
But that was a big lesson I've learned, and I've taught everybody that I've ever since,
Yeah.
done any consulting or any work for,
Mm-hmm.
where I said, here's the way you're going to do this. You're going to first automate, right? You
Mm-hmm.
automate the heck out of your business. So you got to get clear. What is the idea you're having?
Mm-hmm.
What is the offer that solves the problem of, the original idea? What are the systems that we need to build to get this offer to our clients?
Right.
And then and only then are you going to hire team members. And I
Woo!
rather today hire.
Preaching now. Now you're going to church now. I hear that. I love that. That is excellent. It's at that point, automate systems. Then you can start bringing people in because, like you said, and I haven't, this is the first time a term like that has even come on the show, mini me syndrome. It's so easy for us to bring in people that we relate to because we think they're going to have the same integrity. We think that they're going to be just so loyal to us when the truth is it doesn't happen like that. Thank you for sharing that. Wow, that was good.
Yeah, no, they really don't. They don't care
Yeah,
about you. They care about on what they get from you.
right.
And so you have to be really clear about. So I recommend that you take because once you have your automation in place and your process and systems clearly set out, then you can say, what's the right person to manage this system?
Mm-hmm.
So if I have an operations person that needs to do operations over here, if I had an HR person that needs to handle my 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 employees, then I can really look at this very discriminatory and say, okay, I need really in my org chart, I really need 4 people that are managing the 50 people that I have, or 5 people
Right.
that are managing the 50. And then you can say, well, how much work do I have for each one of these positions? Not
Mm-hmm.
all these positions might be full-time positions.
Yeah.
That's another mistake business owners often make, where they say, well, I need a marketing person. Who says you do? Maybe you need a marketing consultant. Maybe you need to hire a fractional CMO.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't need a full salesperson. Maybe you need to do a deal with a company that does the outsourced sales team. And then because what you want to do as a business owner, you always want to look at what is the least vulnerability to my business.
Mm-hmm.
And the least vulnerability is if my job descriptions are so clearly defined and my categories are so clearly defined that if I had to let this one person go for non-performance, my whole operation doesn't fall apart.
Yes.
Then all I have to do is replace the sales guy.
Yeah.
All I have to do is replace the marketing person.
Right.
All I have to do is replace the HR person, but
Right.
my business is never jeopardized. That's
Yeah.
the mistake I made.
Right. And also too, just to add on a little bit too, is your measurables are so important. Knowing what you want your measurables to be, because as you mentioned, certain things can be outsourced. You don't need to necessarily bring in someone and pay them an hourly. If you know your measurables, if you know you want to make 10 sales of this specific product every month, you could bring in and outsource an agency that helps you with this specific thing. And if they're not bringing in the measurables that you want, you can move on from the agency and find a situation that's better. But the measurables, something I've learned personally, measurables are incredibly, especially when you're just starting out. Without those measurables, then again, you can get pulled in a lot of different directions as well.
Yes, and on the KPIs, the key performance indicators or the measurables, um, Jeff Smith, who is the father of the KPIs, um, was on my show on the Business Growth Architect show, and I interviewed him, and he said to me, "You got to be really clear to your point on what you measure." He says, "You never measure people
Ooh,
because you
that
you
was a good,
can't you
yes.
you can only measure output.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you measure something, you got to be really clear on why you measure that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to give you an example to really make that clear. So I get hired as a facilitator, and there is this one company, and they go and they say, well, we want to measure how long people stay in these groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that is not a measurement that will work. Because when we facilitate, the objective of facilitation is to help people make decisions.
Right.
And not all decisions are going to be beneficial decisions how you judge them as being beneficial.
Right.
So if I take you in a group and I say, and now we're going to go really deep. We're going to, look in some mindset stuff, some childhood trauma is going to come up, and then we're going to move through that so we can clear up the mindset and then move into a more prosperity mindsetting.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's going to be able to do that
Right.
because there are people that may have never dealt with trauma. There may have people that have serious abuse, and just the mention of them is going to trigger them so much that they're absolutely paralyzed. So
Right.
you cannot measure that.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to then measure,
Yeah.
have I done my job in allowing people to make decisions that
Mm-hmm.
are good and meaningful for them? That is a measure. That's a healthy measure. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's, to your point, when you measure something when it comes around people, measure the right thing. Because if and another thing is like, well, he's been with me for 20 years. Who says that's a good thing?
I hear that she's pulling a lot of you out now. I mean, she gonna hurt somebody now. There's a lot of that out there. This person's been with me for so and so years, so all of a sudden, what that qualifies them. I mean, had a great colleague who had a great say. He goes, "Used to bees don't make honey," meaning what you used to be last year, 20 years ago. It's about what's gonna happen today and how they can help you in the future.
Yes, and also I think it's not fair to the person because
Mhm.
we know from, the spiritual aspect of success, or from what we've studied about success, that the saying, what got you here won't get you there.
Mhm.
So you undergo a transformation when you go from 5 to 25 employees, when you go from 25 to 50, when
Yeah.
you go from
Right.
50 to 100, from 100 to 250.
Right.
The people that were there in the first five may not be there amongst the 500 because they choose a company where there were only five.
There's
They
only
may
five
not want to
people.
be part
Right.
in a company that has
Five
500.
pencils. Exactly.
So
Right.
when this happens, again, instead of throwing a fit or being upset, we need to be clear as business owners. We now just hitting a marker
Mm-hmm.
and recognize it as a marker. I say, oh, okay. So this is the decision this person is making. They want to only go up to this point. I
Yeah.
thank you so much for all the amazing things you've done. If
Right.
I find somebody who is looking for somebody like you, I'll be gladly recommending them to you. You're
Awesome.
amazing. And if you
Yeah.
find somebody who is right for this position, by all means, send them over.
Exactly. Exactly. And then that's. I mean, I could see based on just what you're saying how much you've been able to grow from kind of looking back on the situation where this employee, pretty much just took your idea. So, that happened, and I believe, you were going through a situation where you had to tragically bury your father, and then because you were losing so much money, now it's like, okay, how am I gonna actually pay for the funeral?
Yeah.
And you were in situations like I was listening to you before, and I said, look, I don't get to complain. Now I've hit rock bottom before. I've lost my car, lost everything. I was sleeping out of a car that eventually got repossessed. So I've been rock bottom too. So you were hitting a lot of triggers with me, but I didn't. I'll say it wasn't, and I hate to compare how person goes rock bottom and things like that, but for you, what pulled you out, then I'll let you tell the story, but what pulled you out of the situation was just kind of it's kind of a serendipitous thing, something that you probably forgot you did when you just kind of shot out a letter to the president, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden these great
Oh,
things happen.
it's
Yeah,
such a great story. And it's,
yeah.
it's,
So
it's,
I'll let you kind of tell it a little bit because I feel like that part of your story, as I was listening to it, it is so important for people who may
to
be
hear.
going through something now to know that it just takes another moment a day. You have got to keep the faith. You have got to keep trying and keep believing something good will happen when you are doing the right things, because everything you spoke about, you were doing the right things. You came here, you were trying to be productive. So I'll let you go ahead and speak
Yeah,
on.
so this part of the story is very interesting because as you said, at this point I'm rock bottom. I'm $135,000 in debt. I'm in this lawsuit with this crazy with my former employee and the photographer, the vendor. Turns out that they were covered under errors and omission insurance with State Farm, the largest and one of the largest insurance companies. So it's just lowly me and my 5 foot firecracker attorney from Long Beach
Right.
fighting the freaking entire State Farm insurance company in a photographer group insurance that insures thousands and thousands of photographers.
Uh,
That was definitely a David versus Goliath, and I'm going like, how am I ever going to win this thing?
yeah.
And then the production season came around. Production season is when it gets too cold in other places of the world to shoot. So beginning in September, when it's too cold in Europe, people would come here, and then I'd photograph all the way through to April when it
Oh,
gets nicer in other places, right?
that's all.
So
Yeah, we learned it today, man. I had no idea that's
you're learning, right? And
we
so,
learned.
September's rolling around. Everything looks nice and good on the books. I have a $500,000 in production value. I'm going like, I think I might, I'm going to be able to do this.
Mhm.
September 11th comes.
Yeah, man.
In one day, I was done, like done. There was nothing left. It was gone. Every single job I had, there was not a person in their right mind that would go on a plane and fly of all places to Los Angeles, the longest flight even. So everything got canceled. So I'm standing here, I'm in a lawsuit. I just lost the second half of my business. And I'm going like, this is just bad. I'd be better be coming up with something pretty quickly. And at this point, I had this idea of building the stock photography business,
Hmm.
but my money was in the toilet, so I basically had to let everybody go and figure out what to do. We were able to settle the lawsuit, and then we settled the lawsuit. And when I paid the attorney, I paid my debt, and I looked at what was left at the bank. I went to the flower mart here in Los Angeles, bought a bunch of flowers for my attorney for saving my butt, and I literally had $100 left in the bank account after I'd settled, right? And so I go into debt again because I have this new idea. At least I don't have any debt right now, and I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper in debt. Now I'm $135,000 in debt. And now it's like game over. I have to borrow money to pay interest on borrowed money, also known as the death spiral in finance.
Right.
And I um, fly to Germany to drum up some business. My father had a stroke, but my father did not have a stroke. My father had pancreatic cancer that had metastasized into his brain and caused the stroke. He totaled his car. He died 6 weeks later. So he's my best friend, my biggest supporter, my cheerleader. And suddenly all of that is over. And I remember I'm standing at the grave in Germany, and and it's this beautiful picturesque setting in Nether Bavaria with this Baroque church from the 14th century behind us. And it's the first day of spring, and we just buried my father. My phone rings. It's my office in Los Angeles. We've just been served a notice while I'm in Germany, in Los Angeles. I'm losing the house too. And at this point, I fell to my knees and I raised my fist and I yelled at God and I said, you know what, dude? Um, no disrespect here, but what the heck is going on here? This is just not freaking normal. I said, I've done everything right. I'm fighting, like, I'm doing what I can. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. I give up. I completely and utterly surrendered to them all. There was literally nothing I could do. I've spent all the money. I've invested everything I had. Now I'm losing my dad. I'm a single mom. I can't work any harder. I can't work more hours. I come back and I'm going like, that's it. I'm done. And then I get a letter from the White House. And it's a letter from the President of the United States. And it says the president sends you his best wishes. And what I did not tell you is that in my absolute desperation, I had also a former mother-in-law who was a complete nag about this. You need to write the President of the United States. Why are you bothering with writing anybody else? Nobody can help you. Why don't you go straight to the top? Why don't you talk to the number one guy in the country? If anybody can help you, it's the President of the United States. Have you written a letter yet? And at one point, I was so sick and tired of having this
Mhm.
conversation that I
Right.
said, I'm just going to write the damn letter so I don't have to talk about this anymore.
So
Right?
just for context, is this a mother-in-law that still lived in Germany with
No,
you?
no, 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 no.
Okay.
That was my ex-mother, my ex-husband's mother-in-law,
Right. So
mother.
you guys
Yes.
were living in the States in LA, and the mindset or the idea to write a letter
Yes.
to the president was there. When I was listening, I was assuming that maybe this was something that, because you're right, maybe this was something that in Germany and then maybe write a letter, but this was something where you're already established in the States and you have a mother-in-law that's telling you to write a letter to the president.
No, I mean I'm here in in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. Been here for a long time,
Right.
and she, she was she was working at the post office, so she
Huh.
understood the government and these things, and she just kept pestering me about writing a letter to the president.
Wow.
So the message really here is, just to make sure we point this out, is that when you give up control and you lean into the yes, which is, all well documented in the surrender experiment and the untethered soul and some of these philosophical writings, is that you have to give up control over certain things. It's really the spiritual aspect of business.
Yes.
I just wrote it because I needed her to go away because I literally could not have this conversation one more time.
Right.
So I get the letter from the White House. And now I'm being put in touch with the second in command in Los Angeles County for the Small Business Administration, the largest government body for helping small business owners.
Right.
And because he also got a letter from the White House, it's the number two in command, not some underling, but the number two. And then he calls me and he basically, and I'm really rephrasing this for clarity,
Mm-hmm.
what nutcase would write a letter to the President of the United States and not call him directly?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, it never even occurred to me that I could or should call you.
Right.
And and so I came in and he said to me, I'll put in what you put in. And I had a business plan written that I wrote from 9 o'clock at night until midnight every single day until I had all figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they found me a bank that took my $135,000 in debt, turned it into a 10-year fixed loan,
Mm-hmm.
and freed up my line of credit. And that brought me to break even 3 months later. That's how close I was. I was 3 months away from break even.
Mm-hmm.
And 18 months later, I'm the world leader in my category. And what my category was, I was licensing the rights to reproduce the images of celebrity home stories,
Mm-hmm.
Madonna, Terry Hatcher, Seal,
Right.
Francis Ford Coppola. And because it was a photo edited Elle magazine, I knew how to sell these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I built this global network of a syndication network where we would get Madonna's house. I put it, back then on the fax. And next morning I had 30 orders that came in.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I became the leader, and that's when the Bill Gates company came and says, "Can you show us how you do it?" And I said, "Absolutely not. You want it, you buy it. So how
Right.
much do you want?" I said, "Couple $1 million." And they said, "Okay." And that's how I sold my business to Bill Gates for millions.
So first of all, like I was telling you before we started, I commend your ability to be transparent and vulnerable, and pretty much tell your story in a way that really touches not only my heart, but I'm sure it touches anybody's heart who's actually listening and is really going through a lot. Going through whether it is losing a parent or a best friend, like you said, someone that's a supporter of you. And I'm sure he's still smiling down on you every single day, smiling down on his baby girl, seeing what you've been able to build and seeing what you've been able to do. So, I got to commend you on that. But when it comes to the fact that you were about to lose your house and this letter came in and you got this call, can you walk us through a little bit about what was unique? And you kind of said that you kind of talked about it a little bit, but for anybody that may not be in your category, may not be familiar with the work you do, what would you say made it unique to the point where Bill Gates sees it and says, "I want it, I want it," and then for you to have the confidence to say, "Okay, you want it, I want a couple million," and
So
talk
it's really
yeah.
it's really synchronicity. They had bought for a lot of money a
So like a
celebrity.
Madonna's house was selling for, like you said, you mentioned you were taking
No,
pictures.
so Bill Gates had purchased through this company that he owned, privately held.
Mm-hmm.
He had purchased this great celebrity archive, one of the oldest and most prestigious photo archives in Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't grow the brand. And so the vice president who was running this particular division needed to come up with a plan on how to increase and grow this particular brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had, and I was literally the only player. I mean, there were like two, three other players, but I by far was the most successful from them.
Mhm.
And so he came and he had approached me because they wanted to know if they had the images of the portraits of Madonna. I had her house.
Mhm.
So if the idea was that if they could combine the portraits with the celebrity homes, that they could even, that they could grow the brand, and it was kind of like a natural extension, which it certainly was.
Right.
Um, and that is really the moment in time where, call it luck, call it synchronicity, call it fate.
Mhm.
But that's when everything aligned. I had something at this moment in time that somebody was looking for,
Mhm.
and they didn't know they were looking for it until they saw it. And then once they saw it, they wanted that.
Right.
And because a lot of, survival of the brand depended on it. And I was literally the only option.
Right. And it is also too important to point out for anybody that's looking to sell anything, you were active. You were actually active out there and you had this business plan put together.
Yep.
So whenever you do want, if you do want to build a business that eventually gets sold, your things have to be active and you have to be making sure you're putting your stuff out there to the point where somebody can come in and say, okay, I want it, and then you're able to move forward. That's on you. That's something that's in your control to do. And then when somebody finds you, opportunities kind of present themselves. So, you make the sale, you do what you have to do. What happens next? Do you build your own business after? Like, what do you do in order to serve people after you make that sale?
Well, I was offered the job to run the entire division
Mhm.
of this business, and which I accepted and did, and really did not enjoy very much. I realized that there's a lot wrong with corporate America and the way it treats its people and the culture that a lot of these places are fostering.
Right,
Um, I couldn't understand on how a certain type of people are treated in this business, and and the golf club stuff over the weekend that you don't even know about, and then you fly on Monday to Seattle, and then a decision had been made that you didn't even know a meeting was being had on some club or
right.
golf course, and you
Huh.
came for nothing, and nobody even told you about this, and I thought that was really strange.
Wow.
But and so I went back out on my own and been in consulting and coaching ever since.
Mhm.
And um there's been a lot of transformation for me in the sense that again, I made a lot of mistakes in how I was going to set this up. And it's not been until really recently where I decided that I was going to take a lot of the spiritual aspect of what
Yeah.
I have learned into my strategic consulting.
Yes.
And I'm seeing that it really is resonating because I do feel we're at a moment in time where people just want more. It's not just money. People don't just want money. I
Mhm.
think people know that if you just have money, you just have money. Then the money's out of the way. But you
Yes.
still need to live a life. You still want kids to talk to you. You still want your family to like you. You still want your wife to want to touch you, or your partner to want to hang out with you and not hate you. You don't want to blow up your life on in this quest to getting there. And that, I think, is where the work that you and I do really comes in, where we help people to identify how is it going to need to be set up for you to actually enjoy what you do in the process.
Yes. Now you mentioned kind of a time frame when you were talking about September 11th. I believe I was actually
A
when
long time ago.
I might have been, yeah, sixth grade by then. So as you come in and you bring it current with technology and with whether it's AI or even Zoom or just all the virtual stuff, what would you say is kind of the first step you took when it comes to aligning spirituality with business? What are the first step you take, and then how do you kind of see it snowball from there?
That is so good to ask that. I think it's really surrendering, and the surrender is a part of. So I had a very intense spiritual journey at the beginning of the year,
Mhm.
and that was the message that I walked away with, that I really needed to infuse more spirituality in the strategic part of things I do. When you really look into the science that rules everything, you see that there's energy that connects everything. Like if we look at the molecules, the molecules don't even touch. So if you look at, my hand or coffee, whatever, which appears to be liquid, the molecules don't even touch. So everything really, if you look at it, is an illusion because it appears to be that way, but it's all like molecules that kind of like hanging out together.
Mm-hmm.
So then you look at if a big oak tree knows that it needs to move its roots aside to let the seedling come up and survive. It has no brain, but it has an innate intelligence. So where's this intelligence coming from? So if a tree can be tied into this energy and this intelligence that somehow seems to be there because the tree knows when to put the leaves up and when to shed them. Somehow the birds know when to fly from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
This happens also normal and logical that you go, there has to be something that rules this that I don't have an understanding of. That's the spiritual aspect. And then you say, if I would fully trust, like the tree, that I know when it's time to move my roots,
Mm-hmm.
and I could surrender and trust that the universe or God or spirit, whatever you or one source has my back, that it's here to make me succeed. What if I let up the control and instead of trying to control the outcome, surrender to the outcome, but still, envision and do all the things that I know that create the outcomes? Now, if you go into Tony Robbins or into Napoleon Hill or Wallace Waddle or any of the great literature on these things, you can go back all the way to Marcus Aurelius.
Right.
And you hear the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's
Mm-hmm.
the mind that's your athlete. It's not the
Right.
body, it's the mind.
Right.
And so if I can get clear about the vision, where I want to go, and I really create an energetic vibration that will allow me to attract these kinds of things coming to me,
Mm-hmm.
then that's the spiritual aspect then that flips it from persuasion to attraction.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, the big shift that we're seeing right now. And this is really what happens with team building. And
Right.
that is so often overlooked. If you are clear who you want
Mm-hmm.
and what these people should be like, and you really truly care about them, you will attract these people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to persuade them. They will be attracted to you because they believe you. And why do they believe you? Because your vibration is on that level that resonates with what they want. And they can't even explain why. They just say, you know what? I feel like you get me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a vibrational match.
Yeah, and it comes out when you fix the mindset piece, it comes out every day in the way people perceive you, and then the way you are the things that you're able to do. Like I'll give you a prime example. It was, I have a football background, and we're actually recording this the first week of the NFL starting. So it was last Thursday. I went to watch a game at a sports bar. I was by myself, and I wasn't with a specific team. They didn't have a dog in the fight. My team wasn't really on, but I was watching the game and I was kind of analyzing. And I'm asking certain questions, and then there was this lady that looked at me. She goes, "You seem like a really smart guy. Who do you think is going to win? What is this one good?" And then we ended up having a great conversation. We passed along contact info, and she's actually a physical therapist, someone that's kind of in my field of work. And I was telling her about the podcast. All sorts. This is a great conversation because I'm sitting there watching the game and I'm giving like an analytical, just a way of looking at it. And she's kind of new to football, doesn't know football as well. She has a team, but she kind of looked at me and said, "You seem like a smart guy." And based on what you're saying in terms of spirituality, you're right. Attracting the right people is all on you. Attracting the right people can be you. And when you're talking about the business you're in, you're not going to control it. This example that you gave with the trees, it's incredible because I don't know how they know it's going to be the right way and the roots are going to move here and the roots are going to move there. But it's just like in business. You can give out cards all day. You can post on social media all day, come up with the slogans, the photo shoots, everything. You don't know who's gonna look at it. There's no controlling who's gonna like it or dislike, maybe misread what you said in a message. None of that is on you. What you can control is what your intention is and what your
Mhm.
mindset is, and that's gonna bring in the right people.
Exactly. And that you know, again, I want to make sure that we really have this message coined today.
Yes.
This is the big shift. This is the activation that is taking place right now. Because when I look at what's out there in the political world, how much of a disconnect that is with everybody I talk to. I have not talked to a single person that's listening to anything that's being said that says, oh my God, I so buy into that. You know, the only thing we look at is like, oh my God, never that. I can only do that because it's two choices that nobody wants.
Yeah.
And then between the two choices, you pick the one that you think's gonna hurt you less. Like,
Yeah.
what kind of strategy is that?
Man.
Right? So the outside world is so disconnected from what most of the people want.
Yeah.
Then now what we have to do is we really have to step up and say, we're going to change. It's an inside job. We're going to change this from the inside out. We're going to change ourselves first. And
Yeah.
we're going to create an environment where we have people that work here that really want to work here. We believe that, you know, if your employee is sick, well, I'm sure that if you treat them well, they're going to catch up and it's all going to work out, right? You're going to figure it out. You don't have to throw a temper tantrum. You don't have to go, oh my God, you know, our kid's sick again. How
Mhm.
dare she? Is like, her kid is sick.
Yeah.
She needs to be home. Her child is sick. What are you going to do? Give her something to do at home, right?
Yeah.
And then of course she's going to get sick because then her baby, you know, I mean, those are just things, but on an energetic level, when you give without this expectation of return, when you really put this out there, it's going to come from all kinds of places back.
Mhm. I'm like so happy you brought up politics in this because I've been on record saying so many times there's not one politician that's going to help you if you're not willing to help yourself. And your story is living proof example of that. You were willing to help yourself. You were willing to send something out. Didn't know what was going to happen. Did it matter that George W. Bush was a Republican, a Democrat, and it did not? None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was there was an individual willing to help herself, him or herself, and that's the only thing that you have. That should be your mentality, not like you said, oh, this one's worse than the other one, so I'm just going to pick the lesser two evils. That's not a mentality that you should be taking. So thank you
Yeah.
again for sharing that, because I've been preaching that, and I get a lot of pushback when I talk about when I go talk politics, and it's something that people don't necessarily want to hear because it requires work. It requires getting out of the comfort zone. It requires you debunking all the stuff they taught you in school, the multiple
Mhm.
choice, and you're successful because you got an A or a B, and all of a sudden it debunks all that. But it's necessary, guys. It's necessary if you want to push society forward. The world is changing. We're having a conversation via Zoom. It's not the way it used to be, and it's our responsibility to leave something better for the younger generation. I cannot stress that enough. So you know, I do want to be very respectful of your time. I know we could probably talk for hours, but can you just tell people a little bit about what's next for your business, how they can get in touch with you, and where do you see this thing moving forward? What's your vision kind of for the next 15 years?
Yeah, so my vision definitely has changed. So I've noticed that a lot of the internet marketing techniques just don't work, and
Mhm.
that we have to get very conscious as business owners that we need to move from the persuasion, as I said, to the attraction model. I
Mhm.
really encourage all business owners that are listening to this to think about what that means for you, because ads are not working, email deliverability is going down. Everything is, is controlled by the big data companies. And guess what? They all want to make money with your data. So
Mhm.
you're going to have to get a lot smarter about how you're going to attract clients. And I think that at least for me, the path forward is, I'm starting an accountability group. I don't want to really call it a mastermind group, and it's very inexpensive. Um, and I took this from a um, a gig that I facilitated for a couple of years, where the goal was to get business owners to $1 million. And
Mhm.
if your clients have 20 employees, they're probably way over $1 million. But
Right.
the point was, how do we get people to understand if they're in the build, in the grow, or in the scale phase? And
Mhm.
then how do I build an accountability group around that to move people to that next goal? So
Mhm.
we're launching that. So if somebody's interested in finding out, and it's accountabilities for people that kind of know what they need to be doing, but it needs to be fine-tuned, and then they need to be held accountable that they're actually doing it.
Yeah.
That's the group that I'm building right now, and that's going to be launching. And then we have a number of different programs and consulting ideas. Everything I do is structured
Hmm.
because I feel that we need to have a determined outcome so we can work towards something which fits into the spiritual aspect of what we talked about. Um, that you got to get clear on where you want to go, because
Yeah.
only then can I help you devise a strategy to actually get somewhere. I don't work with people that don't know where they're going, because you can pick anyway. You don't need to work with me. You can work with anybody. It doesn't matter. But if people say, I want to really step into my spirituality, I really want to feel more fulfilled, I want to have more purpose, I want to be a better leader. I want to be an impact driven leader, and I want to attract people that are that way. And I need somebody to help me build that strategy without killing myself, blowing up my family.
Hmm.
That's somebody that you would send to me. So you just go to uncoverysession.com, make
Hmm.
sure you mention the show, and you'll get priority treatment. And we'll have a 15-minute phone conversation, and we'll see if anything resonates, if I can help. If I do, I will tell you. If I can't, I will tell you. And if I know who's somebody who can do it better than I do, I will also tell you.
All right. And all that will be included in the show notes as well. And appreciate you looking out for the listeners. You move swiftly. You listeners are getting a little spoiled, man. There's a lot of people coming on here giving you some awesome opportunities, and you got to be taking advantage of them. It is very important. It's one
Oh,
thing.
and one more thing, and one more thing.
Yeah,
And
go
for
ahead.
anybody listening, make sure wherever you pick up this podcast that you go there right now, give
Mhm.
it a 5-star review, make a little comments. Comments are super important for the algorithm because it tells the algorithm good stuff is happening here, and share this episode with one person that needs to hear what we talked about today.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Ray. Appreciate you very much. So, Beate, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. It's back to September 11th. It's the next day. I want you to pretend that you're there, that version of you has come into the Zoom room and she's literally lost everything, has no hope, nothing. Pretend that version of you is here in the Zoom room. Give her some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
I think it goes back to a similar situation that I had in my childhood when I felt that there really was no hope, that I was never going to get out of it.
Hmm.
I think I would send myself to that person hanging out with a cup of coffee, probably a glass of wine more likely, and say, you're gonna have a couple of really hard years ahead of you, but when your ship comes, it's a luxury liner. It's coming.
Say less. I'm very rarely on this show do I have and am I at a loss for words, but you you brought it, and I definitely appreciate your transparency. Appreciate. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.